Two big trades to talk about. Who's going to play in the Super Bowl? Who's going to pick number one in the 2025 NFL Draft? We're going to talk about all that and more on the first episode of Countdown to Sunday. Hello, everyone, and welcome to, as I said, the first edition of Countdown to Sunday. This will be the Draft Countdown NFL and fantasy-centric podcast. We're going to do this every Thursday live at this time. I am your co-host, Brian Bosarge, joined, as will always be, my co-host here, Brad Menendez. Brad, it's Countdown to Sunday, man. What you feel about it?
I'll be honest. I'm just glad football is back. I mean, preseason is getting your whistle a little wet and getting you a little excited, but, you know, we are a very short amount of time away from real football, checking fantasy lineups, making lots of trades, trying to do some crazy things. And I'm here for it. It's that time of year. You feel that crisp fall air starting to sprinkle in here in the Midwest, although I hear 90s next week. And we're back at football in a couple weeks. I'm here for it. It's going to be a great time. And this week we get week 0 in college. So it's all the more exciting.
Yeah, we've been experiencing the last couple of days what we in the South call fake fall, whereas it's 75 degrees in the morning, and that lasts until about 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's fair. I woke up here in Indiana. We woke up to 49 this morning, and then it jumped up into the mid 70s, and it'll be 90 next week. So I'm with you. It's definitely been fake this week.
All right. So if you're following along on X or on YouTube and you have any questions, drop them in the chat, or send them to @DraftCountdown. We'll get to them there. If not, you can also ask questions in our Discord. Go to draftcountdown.com, top right corner of the search bar there. There is a link to join the Discord if you have not already. Always good discussions there. And if you are watching on YouTube and you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you can be notified when we go live each and every week here on the YouTube channel. I mentioned the other night on the Draft Countdown podcast that we have changed it up a little bit. No more Shane P. Hallam here. No more hour-long podcast. I made that decision to split them up 50-50, if you will. Tuesday nights, we'll run the Draft Countdown podcast where we'll talk about college football and the NFL draft mostly. And then Thursdays here, we're going to do a little more fantasy content than we maybe did in the past. And we're going to talk definitely more about the NFL here with me and Brad each and every Thursday. And also, instead of, having an interview with somebody, or a guest on, split up into the middle of our regular show, I'm going to be doing that solo with the Draft Countdown one-on-ones. And those will drop at differing times, maybe not every week, but, different times. Had one drop earlier this week with Pete Smith when we previewed the AFC North. And coming up at some time early next week, I recorded it last night with Craig Stevenson of Avail.com. We talked about the Sun Belt and college football in general and a few other teams there. So look forward to that. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel to get those. But Brad, as I said, we're going to talk NFL stuff here. And, we had some big trades this week. And the biggest news of the week, obviously. We'll start with the first one that went down, and it's a few days old now. But the Patriots traded edge rusher Matthew Judon to Atlanta for a 2025 third-round pick. Everybody that watched Hard Knocks saw that the Bears were trying to get that trade done, but they could not extend the contract of Judon, and I assume Atlanta did. So that's how we go.
Yeah, I mean, it was anybody who thinks that they have a chance to win their division should have tried to be in on Judon. I mean, as long as he's healthy, he's a high-end pass rusher. So why not? Atlanta thinks they have a shot in the South. I don't know if that's true, but, I still think it's kind of Tampa's division to give away at this point. But I think it's a good trade for Atlanta. They've needed pass rushers for how many years now. So adding Judon, and I don't know exactly how they're going to deploy him yet. Are they going to have him stand up and kind of rush off the edges on outside backer? Or is he going to be more closer to the line? It'll be fun to see how they deploy him in this defense, but I'm excited for Atlanta. I think it was a great move for them, especially for just a third.
Yeah. I mean, it's a Maybe the third is a little too steep, though. You got the extension, but he is 32 years old, so hopefully you get some return on investment there. But we'll see how that goes. And good for us to give us something else to talk about. Big trade today, intra-division trade. The Commanders will get a 2025 third-round pick and two 2025 seventh-round picks from Philadelphia. In exchange for wide receiver Jahan Dotson, former first-round pick, and a 2025 fifth-round pick. This now gives the Eagles a triumvirate at receiver of Devonta Smith, A.J. Brown, and now Dotson. That's a big three.
Plus you've got Goddard. Plus you've got, Barkley. I mean, there's a lot of mouths to feed now. I mean, from a fantasy perspective, from a pure fantasy perspective, I think this is better for Washington pass catchers than it is for whatever Philadelphia is going to try to do with their target shares now. Like I was saying pre-show, and if you follow me on Twitter, I posted my De'Ami Brown shares are finally starting to look a little exciting because, you've heard a little rumblings in the preseason that he's done well and the team really likes him. And, and he needed some development coming out of college, but I'm excited for him more than I am what's going to happen now. I mean, A.J. Brown, I feel good about, but who does Jahan Dotson really eat into? Is it Smith? Is it Goddard? Is it a little bit of both? Saquon's going to get some targets. It's really one of those situations where outside A.J. Brown, now I start to feel a little more concerned about everything else that they've got going on there because, how can you really be fantasy relevant outside of wide receiver 3 type upside with the rest of these guys if they're going to eat into each other's workload?
Yeah, it's for the Commanders. Well, you mentioned De'Ami Brown probably going to get a little bump here. I know a lot of talk that Luke McCaffrey, the rookie from Rice, might see some expanded targets now as well.
Good. Yeah, absolutely could. Yeah, I think, and then Olamide Zaccheaus is a guy that they brought over from Philly that, you've heard a little bit about, but he's mostly a slot guy, so I don't think that he'll get a lot of outside work. So it's one of those things where, there's a couple guys that could get a little bump here from fantasy perspective. Guys that I definitely would take a shot on. McCaffrey and Brown, I think, are really intriguing in this situation for sure.
So this also puts a bow on the Ron Rivera era as a head coach in Washington. His 4 first-round picks, 2020 Chase Young on his third team.
Yep.
2021 Jamin Davis has converted from linebacker to defensive end, now a reserve. 2022 Jahan Dotson traded after 2 seasons. 2023 Emmanuel Forbes still needs to eat a sandwich. Not a starter. Not good. Drafting there by Washington, and you can see why they've completely overhauled front office and coaching staffs there. That was some evaluation seeming mistakes there.
If you're a Washington fan, I think you need to start breathing some fresh air. I mean, it seems like they're making smart decisions, and even this trade, I mean, they've got a fair return for a guy that really has been underwhelming at times throughout the little bit of time he's been in the league. So I think this front office and this coaching staff, I mean, I'm at least excited about the direction they're moving. Made good decisions, landed some good free agents, a good draft class, not afraid to cut ties on guys. I mean, seems like they might be moving in the right direction now, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. Seems to be that way. One more thing to talk about here, news-wise, involving a rookie was J.J. McCarthy, the first-round draft pick by Minnesota, the 10th overall pick, the Michigan quarterback. Season-ending knee surgery, will not be a starting quarterback in the NFL this year.
Yeah, I mean, as a Michigan man, that's tough. I was excited to see him beat Sam Darnold out for the starting job, if that was going to be the case. The interesting thing, though, is from a fantasy perspective, Sam Darnold is a guy that never really got a fair shake in the NFL. It was a high draft pick, but he had to deal with the likes of Adam Gase and just poor coaching throughout his time. It goes to Carolina, coaching staff changes, inefficiencies. He went to San Francisco, and I feel like got some good coaching, and now he's going to get some more good coaching. Kevin O'Connell is a good coach. I mean, he is a very good coach and knows how to help those quarterbacks. So from a fantasy perspective, I am all in on giving Sam Darnold a chance this year as your backup. You know, if you're in a 1 QB and you need a 1 week filler, I in a league, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. In a 16 team league where it's just 1 QB, my starting quarterback's Brock Purdy, and I went and traded for Darnold because I had no backup, and I was okay with it for a year. From a super flex perspective, you know, he's probably more like your QB3, and you hope that he develops this year. But really, all that being said, you don't want him to be much of a long-term guy because JJ McCarthy really does have the tools to be successful if he can bounce back and really get some good work in. So it stinks for JJ. But I'm okay with him not starting this year anyway, because he needed some time to develop and get into the NFL rhythm. So, you know, it's kind of a blessing in disguise, although I'm sure Minnesota fans probably aren't super excited about that. But, you know, they're set up for success. Great weapons around them. Offensive line's improving. The defense is moving in the right direction. I mean, whoever winds up being the starter this year and for the future, they're in a good spot.
Yeah, I firmly been on the record wasn't the biggest JJ McCarthy guy, but I hate to see this. You know, you want to see everybody get a try. We've got 3 of the 6 first round draft pick quarterbacks have been anointed starters already. Caleb Williams, Chicago, Jaden Daniels in Washington, and Bo Nix in Denver. Still waiting on New England to make the call there. Will it be Drake May? We'll see. And McCarthy. Now, Penix obviously not going to be the starting quarterback in Atlanta, but we knew that at the point in time he was drafted. But
for Drake May's sake, I hope he's not the starter this year. That would be much safer for him.
Right. I agree. I think he'll be a lot better off not starting this year. That team's bad.
Taking that beating.
All right. So speaking of bad teams, let's play a game here, Brad, and let's call some shots. We're gonna guess the top 5 teams we think that are going to be contenders, if you will, if that's the right word here, to hold the number 1 pick in the 2025 draft.
Okay.
A draft that we don't think is going to have a number 1 overall worthy quarterback in it, you know, at first glance. So we'll go here. We'll go 1-1 here. So my number 1 team that I think is lined up here is the same team that's picked number 1 the last 2 drafts, the Carolina Panthers. They're still not good. They still haven't done enough to get Bryce Young weapons. And if they pick number 1 again, are they cutting bait on Bryce Young and starting over again? Their ownership is bad. I mean, he's a very impulsive guy who seems to just be cutting bait on everybody. I like Dave Canal. I like the hire. So we'll see. That's my only reservation is seeing what he did with Baker Mayfield last year. That's my only reservation about, you know, having them at the top of my list. But Carolina, number 1.
Well, and I would play a game in this situation. So if Bryce Young stays healthy for 16 games, has a good completion percentage, QBR, like he plays well, but they just don't win games because that defense is not going to help them out. Their offense, the skill positions are weak. You know, I mean, running backs are probably their strength at this point, and that's okay. Tight ends are rough. Wide receivers, they have 1 decent receiver and then some question marks. You know, if Bryce Young still plays well enough, do you feel comfortable that the team will give him another shot for year 3? You know, or, you know, if he's injured, then do they cut bait and go? I mean, that's kind of where I'm at with it. I didn't put Carolina in my top 5. But I understand why you put them in the top 5 because it could happen. I believe in Bryce Young. And like you said with Dave Canales, I think he could do some really nice things with Bryce Young because I think Bryce Young's just as smart as Baker, probably just as athletic. Injury issues will be a concern for me just because of how, you know, he's much smaller than I'm Baker. Sorry. So I'm with you. I think they could be, but that would be my question back to you is if he plays well, do they give him 1 more year? Or, you know, if he gets hurt, do they cut bait? That's where I'm at.
Right. Yeah. Brad, who's your number 1 contender?
My number 1 is the New England Patriots because there is there's no hope for 2024, but there is hope for the future. I like Gerard Mayo. I like the coaching staff. I like the direction they're going. I like that they got their quarterback now. So if they do go number one next year, they can get their edge rusher. They can go get a James Pierce, or they can get an offensive lineman if they think that's the case, or they can trade back and get some more draft picks. I mean, there's, they've got the quarterback, because I believe Drake May has that, has that potential. So give me New England, because not only do they have a tough schedule, their team is just in rough shape, and they're already trading off assets that could have helped them. I mean, Judon wasn't going to be long for them anyway, but I could see them trading off other guys. I mean, some of these other vets that maybe they think are not going to help them. So I went New England number one. They just seem like in a really rough situation this year.
I had New England number 2 for all of the reasons that you just mentioned. I think 1 to 53, or if you want to say active game day, 1 to 45, they had the worst roster in the NFL.
Yeah, I couldn't argue
or
with that.
Damn close to it.
Yep. I mean, they're absolutely
number 2 for you is the same as number 3 for me, and that's the Tennessee Titans, another team who I think is a bottom 5 roster in the league. They've got holes on offense, holes on defense, and I am not a Will Levis guy, never have been. I love Brian Callahan. I'm glad he got a shot to be the head coach here. And maybe he got the head coach job to try to get the most out of Will Levis. But I think this is a team that's going to be looking at hoping one of these quarterbacks develops into a top echelon draftable pick.
Yeah, Will Levis is one of those guys where there've been times where I'm like, man, I really like the attitude, the willingness to just kind of let it rip, the kind of the gunslinger mentality. And then there's times when you watch, and even watching him on the field, some of those games last year, like the Miami one, you're like, oh, he's the rah, like this could work. Then there's other times you're like, why did he do that? That was just a dumb thing, and it's like, can you get consistency? Maybe they can turn him into a thing. I just don't, because teams are so quick to cut bait and move on, especially when it's not their guy. I just don't see him sticking with him very long. So that's why I put them in the top. And their defense is probably going to be the thing that keeps them in games, but injuries have hit some of those guys in the past. So if that happens again, I mean, they could be toast.
Right. Yeah, I agree. All right. Number 3 for you is number 4 for me. So I'll let you go here. And my favorite general manager, Mickey Loomis and the New Orleans Saints, Brad. Derek Carr, man, he ain't it. He is not it at quarterback. I want to see Rattler get a shot, but I mean, even that is, I don't know, man. This roster, at some point, I keep saying this over and over and every year, and it never happens, but the Bills got to come due at some point. Every year they start, even though the cap goes up $40 million every year, they always start every league year like $70 million over the cap.
They are definitely, you could argue they're probably the worst mismanaged team over the last decade, right? I mean, when it comes to handling the money, handling, a lot of those office decisions. So they got lucky that Sean Payton kept them safe for a while there, but they're definitely having to pay their dues at this point. For me, the reason that I would put them as a potential for this is not only because I don't believe that Derek Carr's the thing for them. They just have holes in a lot of spots that you really shouldn't have them. They have concerns in the receiving game, outside of Chris Olave, who's really going to step up and be something for them. On the defensive side, their linebackers aren't bad, but their defensive linemen, there's concerns there. Age is catching up to some of their guys. I mean, there's too many questions that I think it probably becomes a problem for them sooner rather than later. And I expect it this year with their schedule, with the division they're in. I think there's teams that can beat them twice, in Atlanta and Tampa, and Carolina. It wouldn't surprise me if they split it with them, and it just doesn't bode well for them if that happens.
Yeah. Jeff Bell had a tweet the other day with a great stat in it. Said Mickey Loomis's GM has 5 playoffs wins in the last 14 seasons, while during that span have spent the most cap space.
Oh, that's terrible. Terrible, man.
That is not good ROI on that one at all.
That's bad.
Our man over in Ireland watching here, getting ready to see Pat McAfee and week 0 college football live from Dublin. We talked about that on Tuesday, but yeah, thanks for watching there, Gary 10 over in Ireland. Number 5 for me was Minnesota, and they and this is simply because I am not high on Darnold at all, and I don't know that they are built to. I don't think they're going to be that bad enough to be number 1, but I think if a couple more injuries hit, they could be in a bad way.
Yeah, if Darnold's still seeing ghosts, and I believe in that offensive line more than I believe in Darnold. I think the offensive line can do some things to help him. That was the biggest issue early on in his career. He just didn't have good protection, and he didn't have enough time to make good decisions. So if the coaches can help him and that line can protect him and the injuries don't hit, I think he'd be okay. But I absolutely can understand. I mean, injuries can wreck anybody's season.
4 for you is Arizona.
This really comes down to Kyler not being healthy. I mean, do we get full 16 games or full 17 games out of him? We haven't yet, right? Like we haven't in a while. So I could see them easily walk right into that number 1 pick.
And at that point, they've got to be thinking about getting away from old Roadrunner there.
He can go back to playing Call of Duty.
There you go. And number 5 for you was the Raiders. And I got a feeling this is maybe head coach being in over his head a little bit. Gardner Minshew is a starting quarterback. Various other things. Maybe if this team's this bad, I mean, you got to be moving Adams at the deadline, right?
I'm surprised Adams didn't get traded to New York already. I mean, you heard rumors throughout the training camp season that, they could wind up moving Devontae Adams back with Aaron Rodgers. So, yeah, for me, it does come down to I don't necessarily think Aiden O'Connell or Minshew is really the answer for them. I think Antonio Pierce isn't a bad coach. I think he needs a better quarterback for sure. I think they made some good decisions along the offensive line, adding some defensive pieces. Draft wasn't too bad. I feel like they made some good decisions there. So it's not that they aren't trending in the right direction. They're in a tough division. Kansas City, obviously, pretty Super Bowl champ. I like the direction Denver's going. The Chargers could wind up getting out of the basement. It's one of those things where they're just in a tough division, and I don't necessarily think their signal caller is going to do them any favors because we know Minshew can be just as much a gunslinger as he can be a turnover machine. So,
yeah, I mean, it's a fun story. He's fun, but yeah, it's hard not to like the guy.
Oh yeah,
but
he is the Uncle Rico of the NFL.
There you go. Let's move on to some fantasy talk before we wrap up the show with making people mad. Let's go over some just some targets for you, Brad. I don't know, what would you say is a standard league these days? 10 team, 12 team? I mean, what is standard for the rubes out here, Brad? Not for you.
Yeah, probably 12 teams. I mean, most nowadays 10 or 12 would probably be where they're at.
Yeah. So who are you targeting? Like, in, let's say hypothetically, you had a fantasy draft starting in a week, next week, and you had 1-1-2. Who are you targeting at that spot in a fantasy draft? Like back-to-back picks at the turn there.
Yeah, I mean, so if it's super flex, early on, you're always drafting your elite players, your elite quarterbacks, things like that.
Well, it's a standard league. So let's say standard league.
We're gonna stay standard. Okay. So you're probably, quarterbacks, you won't start seeing them go till 4th, 5th, 6th round. So you're targeting the high-end receivers. You may sprinkle in a high-end running back. I've always been one of those guys that I draft wide receiver. And if it's just truly standard, there's no tight end premium involved. Give me your top receivers, your Chases, your CDs, even with their concerns of contract. I would still take the best players there. Your AJ Brown's up there in the top. Let's see here. I'm just going through my list. Amon-Ra, as a Lions guy, Amon-Ra is going to get a ton of targets. He's one of those guys that you're taking in the first round. And then once you get to the turn, that's where you really need to start considering running backs. So you'll want to start thinking about, your high end running backs. Probably in the first round, you're going to see somebody take CMC. Most likely the Bijan hype is off the rails. Somebody's going to take Bijan, but then at that turn, can you get maybe a Brees Hall, maybe Jahmyr Gibbs with the injury concerns? Maybe somebody lets him slip out of the first round. Those are guys there that I would start considering. But you really have to know I always tell folks when they message me about trading or drafting, know your league mates, kind of know what they're into. And that'll really help you get a feel for what you're doing. If you're just in one of those random leagues where you jump in and you just join, just go best player available and hope for the best. You take your top receivers at the top, then you try to grab running back in round 2, maybe round 3, if a wide receiver falls that you love, and just let it roll.
And I know in our league we have some Alabama fans that like to target those players earlier than they should. So I can see guys like Derrick Henry going way higher than he should. Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddles, Jalen Hurts. These guys are going to go higher in our league. Who are some mid round targets at like running back and receiver that maybe you drafted your starters? You drafted your starters. Like, who are the guys that you're targeting like for the flex spots?
So probably my biggest choices, and this would probably be after round 5-6 range. I would definitely be targeting Ramondre Stevenson from New England. They're going to have to lean on the running game because they don't have anything at receiver that they can trust. So Ramondre should get plenty of rushing attempts and could even get a lot out of the backfield as a receiver just on those dump offs. If you're looking for another running back, Zamir White from Raiders, he's a guy that I'm still seeing kind of going after round 5. If at least when I'm looking at sleepers ADP, he would be one that I would target that could potentially be a nice piece this year. Even a Najee Harris from Pittsburgh, they brought in Arthur Smith, who we know loves to run the ball. So there'll be plenty of rushing attempts between Jaylen Warren and Najee. And Najee could have a solid bounce back year as a flex guy. If you're looking receivers, the crazy thing to me is when I'm looking at sleepers ADP, you're seeing, after pick 60, you're seeing guys like George Pickens, Devontae Adams. I'm seeing fall all the way down to pick 74. Let's see, Amari Cooper. Terry McLaurin. These are guys that are getting drafted after 5th round and later. I would be jumping all over those guys. If this is a redraft type situation, those guys should all produce, wide receiver 2 at least type production this year. So if you can get them in a wide receiver 2 or flex role, that's a really big get for you. Chris Godwin is another one that's getting woefully underappreciated in fantasy drafts. Even Calvin Ridley. Tennessee's going to have to throw the ball. They're going to be playing from behind, I'm sure, plenty. So a guy like Calvin Ridley can have a bounce back year when he's probably their number 1 option. Hopkins getting a little older, getting a little slower, so those would be guys. Even Deontay Johnson from Carolina. He's another guy that, yes, you may not love Bryce Young or you may not love the direction Carolina's going this year, but they're going to have to throw the ball. So getting guys like this where you can flex in, where they're probably getting 6 to 8 targets each week. They're pretty solid reception target, or they're pretty solid receivers, so they should catch, 60% of those targets. It feels like a good sure shot to get you some good production, either as your wide receiver 2 or flex.
All right, Brad, let's earn your keep here. Who are the guys that you're going to draft, be it as a backup quarterback, be it as a RB4, be it as a wide receiver 5, whatever, tight end 2? Who are the guys that are going to win you a fantasy league by you drafting in rounds 14, 15, 16?
So let's see what we've got. We are looking at that point, you're looking at Cortland Sutton. He would be a guy that I see getting picked right around 149 to 150. Cortland Sutton is a guy that I like Bo Nix in that offense. I think Cortland Sutton is going to get at least 100 plus targets. Should easily be a weekly producer for you. Jacoby Myers from the Raiders could be another one that is in that boat. I hate saying it because I have not been a Zeke fan for a while, but Zeke with the Cowboys, they're going to give him the ball. He may not get their most rushing attempts, but he's going to get a fair amount of rushing attempts every week. Dak trusts him. They're best friends. They eat bowls of cereal together all the time. So I would be okay taking him. In some leagues really late, I've been jumping on J.K. Dobbins, hoping that maybe he's finally injury free, which I know is a crazy thought. But if he's one of those guys that's sitting late in your draft, throw him on your roster and see what happens. Gus Edwards is already banged up. They don't seem to like Isaiah Spiller. There's a lot of questions. They got a rookie there, but Dobbins, when healthy, Dobbins is produced. He just hasn't ever been healthy for more than a couple games. So, those are guys that I would take a shot at. Tyler Algier from Atlanta, I think he gets some action and could be a flexible player for you. That guy could help you, especially as injuries are inevitable in football. So he could be one of those guys that you could look at. Let's see what else we got. Throw Spencer Rattler in the mix too. We know none of us like Derek Carr, right? So why not throw Spencer Rattler as a deep shot that you stash on your roster? He would be a backup type guy, but if you're in a situation, because I'm saying this from experience, I've had leagues where somebody goes crazy and drafts like three quarterbacks, even though it's a 1 quarterback league, and you're left scrambling. So, I'm not drafting him until the very last round, or maybe even just picking him up as a priority free agent if you got the roster space. But depending on how deep your rosters are, he's one of those guys. But I would definitely be taking a shot on some of these rookies too. I like Bo Nix in Denver. That offense is set up for him. Offensive line's in good shape. Got skill position players, multiple running backs. Defense is not bad, is developing in the right direction. Bo Nix could be a league winner, and I wouldn't be surprised. He's a veteran coming into the league. He's 30 years old playing quarterback, so why not? And that's a joke. He's not really 30. I know that. Nobody in the comments say he's not 30. I know he's not 30. So look at some of these rookies. Caleb Williams, great situation. I would even say Jaden Daniels is in a very good situation. Offensive line's in a decent offensive line, good skill position players, even though they traded Dotson, and he runs a lot. I mean, your rookie quarterbacks could be league winners for you if you draft some of these other guys and they get dinged up. So give you a little bit of everywhere. Although we haven't talked tight ends. Hold on. Let me grab some tight ends real quick. Theo Johnson, rookie from the Giants. I wouldn't be surprised if he got some good action because I would still say their best tight end. I like Daniel Bellinger, but Theo Johnson's probably their most athletic, as long as they can get him up to speed. Chig Okonkwo from the Tennessee Titans would be another one. I would say he probably has a chance to get a decent amount of receptions, and you can get him I've seen him go in the last round in a lot of drafts here in the last week or two.
There you go. That's all sound advice. I am targeting Caleb Williams.
I've seen him go. He typically is in double-digit rounds most of all the drafts I've been in. So you can draft him later as your QB2, and he might surprise us this year.
All right, Brad, I mentioned it. We're going to make some people mad here, I think. So we're each going to pick division winners, and we're going to pick our Super Bowl winners right here. We're going to go on the record with it. So I'll start. AFC winning the East. I'm going to go with Miami. I'm not a Jets guy. Just not going to do it. No trust, no faith. AFC North, said it on the podcast with Pete Smith, going with the Bengals. That's
Homer.
It is what it is. Call me a homer or whatever. I think they're the best team in the division.
I like it.
AFC South, I'm going with the Colts. I think the Texans take a small step back. And I like the trajectory of Anthony Richardson, although he just threw a really bad pick six in this preseason game here. And AFC West, I'm going with Kansas City. Obviously, there's nobody else. NFC East, I'm going to go with Philadelphia. I think that's pretty easy. NFC North, going with your Lions, Brad. Going with your Lions. NFC South, we talked about it a little bit earlier. I think Atlanta is primed here to take that division. And that will once again be a one bid division there. And NFC West, I think it's San Francisco, pretty obvious here. And the Super Bowl, yes, I'm going to go homer here. I don't care. Cincinnati over San Francisco in the Super Bowl. Final decision.
You should have said Cincinnati over Detroit. I could at least accept that.
Well,
because Detroit's making the Super Bowl. Let's just put it right out there.
There we go.
All right. And I really don't have, you really can't argue any of those decisions. I think the AFC East, it could be Buffalo's to lose, but they've lost a lot in terms of leadership in that defense, wide receivers. There's just a lot of concerns there. I'm going to go with the Jets just because you won't. I'm going to go Jets just because I think Aaron Rodgers can stay healthy this year. If you get more than 4 plays, maybe you can get to the playoffs, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was Miami. Miami's done enough, and they've done a really good job building that roster. So in the AFC North, you win Cincinnati, so I got to play devil's advocate. Give me, I guess I got to go Baltimore because I don't trust Russell Wilson. I don't trust Deshaun Watson. So give me Baltimore. And then Cincinnati would definitely be a wild card because I really do love Cincinnati's roster. Minus that defensive line, there's depth concerns there.
The depth is the issue there for sure. Yes.
Yeah. AFC South. I live in Indiana, so give me Colts. I'll be a homer for the Indianapolis Colts. Houston's right there though. I think they have a chance to win that division. AFC West, obviously Kansas City. Can't argue that. Philly in the NFC East. Detroit in the North. It is a homer pick, but it's a homer pick with reality. Like Detroit did enough. They've worked on that secondary, which was a big issue. Their defense is going to be another year older and more mature. It's hard not to love them, although Green Bay.
Green Bay is the only other team you could make an argument for, I think, right now, until we see if Caleb Williams is 100% the real deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Miranda would hate me for not saying Green Bay, but you know what, Green Bay sucks. So we're going Detroit. NFC South. You went with Atlanta. I'm going to go back to Tampa Bay just because I think that roster, albeit it is another year older, they did some decent things in the offseason. I think Baker fits what they're trying to do. So give me Tampa Bay, although Atlanta, as long as Kirk Cousins is healthy, they have no reason not to win it. And then San Francisco in the West. Give me Detroit beating – send Kansas City back to Super Bowl. Give me Detroit beating Kansas City in the Super Bowl because they like to beat Kansas City, whether it's preseason, regular season. Now we just got to do postseason, and we can say we beat them in every year.
You get the trifecta right there. So I've got Cincinnati over San Francisco in the Super Bowl. Brad has Detroit over Kansas City in the Super Bowl. We are a completely unbiased podcast here, folks. I swear we are.
Off the rails.
One episode in, and we've just completely tanked.
But, hey, you know what? Detroit hasn't been good since the 90s, so I'm going to ride this wave as long as I can.
Yeah. That's going to do it for the first episode of Countdown to Sunday. As always, if you're new to the YouTube channel here, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can get notified when we go live each and every week. If you're listening to this on an audio platform, be it Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcast, leave us a 5-star review. Share that out as well so everybody else gets the audio love here that you can see. Brad, final thoughts as we're wrapping up the preseason this weekend. Then we're going to see some cuts, and then we're going to get the regular season about 2 weeks away.
We're here. It's always a tough time. I hate cut time just because these guys work so hard to make it to this point. But I hope these teams are able to cut down and make some moves and make some things happen to build up some of the depth. But I hope the best for the guys that don't make it on the rosters. Excited to get to the regular season, and I'm excited for draftcountdown.com. What we've been doing here, we've been working to really try to facilitate a great community, and we thank you guys for watching. Let's get ready for some football. Let's do it.
Yep, that's it. So that's going to do it for this first episode. Follow me on X at Deep Fried Draft. Follow Brad at RotoHeatBrad. Follow Draft Countdown at Draft Countdown, and go to draftcountdown.com for all of your daily draft needs. For Brad, I'm Brian. Good night, everybody.